So tonight is really a dialogue between us and you. The purpose of this meeting is really to hear from you. We started these meetings last year. The four of us got together and thought, well, how can we better represent Rio Rancho? And we take the responsibility of representing you all very seriously. And so the public forum that we had last year actually directly led to legislation that was passed and signed into law. Last session, nearly half of the people that came up to speak at our public forum mentioned concerns with the lottery scholarship. And after that forum, we all met together and developed a strategy of how we could rescue the lottery scholarship, and carried legislation that ultimately was amended into the bill that was passed and signed into law. And so I just want to let you all know how seriously we take the comments that we hear from you all in our constituency tonight. And I will promise that the legislation we carry based off of what we hear will get passed and signed into law, but we want you to know that we're fighting for Rio Rancho. Another example, the Senate bill that Representative Brandt sponsored and we co-sponsored in the House to assist with the problems that several folks mentioned with the high school requirement changes, that all of a sudden many courses that had counted as PE credits were not going to count anymore. And seniors who were counting on those credits to count were now having to drop out of honors calculus to take PE courses. And so the bill we worked on together did two things. One was it restored the ability of local school boards to decide if certain courses can count as PE credit. And the second one was it ensured that graduation requirements couldn't change for a student after they started high school.
I've been in this position for 2 years now, and I would tell you what a blessing to be able to serve this community. I've had some really good success over the last 2 years. I know people that have been up there for 10 years that haven't gotten a bill signed into law, and I've gotten 4 signed into law. So I think that's good. Now, they've not been anything earth-shattering. The one last year was of huge importance. And as Jason mentioned, our phones were ringing off the hook. We heard from you guys last year about the PE issue, and we took it on. We got it passed, and there were some behind-the-scenes battles that you won't know about with that bill, because I'm not allowed to talk about them. But I will tell you, there were some really interesting situations that came up. I will tell you, me and Jason both received letters and cards from, I know, Rio Rancho School District, that both their bands signed cards thanking us for that bill. And that meant a lot. I got cards, from superintendents all over the state saying thank you for taking care of this issue and listening to us and listening to the concerns that we had about this. And so that's just one thing that we've been able to do. This year, I'm taking a little bit bigger chunk out of the apple, going with a few harder bills that I think are important. One is a school fees bill, sticking with my education topic. We have several schools in the state of New Mexico that are charging fees for students to attend public school or to take classes in the public school. In working with the PED and the Attorney General's office, we are trying to get a bill together to bring our state back into compliance with the Constitution, which requires that we provide a free public education for all students in our public schools. I'm not going to go directly into which school districts, but I thought it was only 1 or 2 until PED started looking into it for me, and they said it's very widespread throughout the state. And so it appears that we're going to have to bring law that backs up the Constitution and makes it very clear to districts that we really, really mean it, that you cannot charge for public school. We have one district that actually threatened to withhold our students' high school diploma if you didn't pay their registration fee. That's not legal, and so we're trying to deal with some of that. The other law that I'm trying to get put together, and sometimes it's hard to get things drafted, is the DWI Act. Right now our DWI laws are in 4 or 5 different places within the law. What it does is it allows a lot of loopholes. By not having it in one place, one concise place for DAs to work from, it allows attorneys to manipulate the law. So the first thing we're going to do is take all of the DWI laws and put them into one place. Then we're going to try to work to increase some of the penalties and get rid of some of the loopholes. I don't know how many of you get a little tired of hearing about the guy who's actually been convicted 14 times but is being charged with his 3rd DWI. Anyone remember that happening? That's because there's nothing in the law that says a DA can't charge a 14-time offender with a 3rd offense. We're going to try to fix that. We're going to try to make it to where if they've got 2 convictions and they get another one, they have to be tried for the 3rd offense. Or if they've got 3, they have to be tried for the 4th offense. Another one I'm working on is some of our concealed carry laws. I think they're too onerous on people who carry. I'm wanting to get rid of the 2-year refresher. It seems a little ridiculous that you have to go in for a 2-hour refresher. I don't know who put that in the law, but that's one of the things I'm working on taking out. Working on some voter ID compromise bills. Also looking at, I would be very happy with just putting voter ID straight out. Over 70% of the people in Rio Rancho voted for voter ID. But I don't know if we can get it through the Senate that way, to be honest with you. So, we had a situation in the election just a week ago, well, not a week ago, it's been a month ago, I think, man, time flies. Just a month ago where a lady came in and she didn't know how to spell her name. She didn't know where she lived. She didn't know her birthday, and she was allowed to vote on a regular ballot. I'm sorry, but that doesn't make sense to me. So I think we need to put some things in to where if you don't know how to spell your name, you don't know your address, that at that point you have to show an ID. I think we can at least get that. Last thing is I'm going to try to carry the truancy bill again. That will take away a driver's license for those who are habitually truant. Now, this has been a really interesting bill. The first year I carried it, it passed unanimously out of Senate Education. Last year, it barely passed out of Senate Education. Same exact bill. It wasn't supposed to get out of Senate Education, but someone messed up on the D side and voted for it. They were told to kill the bill. So it died in Senate Judiciary, where our majority leader holds control. And so, those kind of things that make sense, that bring accountability to students, we can't get past. I'm hopeful that by having a new majority in the House, that maybe we can. So those are what things I'm working on for you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. So most of you know me, Representative Tim Lewis, Southern Rio Rancho, District 60, and I'll be serving my 3rd term. So I think this worked out great last year. We're excited to see people again here this year, and hopefully we'll take some good notes and do what we did last year. So off the bat, Representative Harper already talked about the lottery scholarship. I was glad to co-sponsor that, and PE bill and some other bills that we all came from what you guys directly told us, and some other issues. I'm certainly going to continue to fight as a teacher to stop social promotion and I think the third grade is a good place for that. Right now, a lot of people don't realize we're getting hit on both ends. Certainly we care about early childhood education and funding that, and we have different views than the people across the aisle on how to get that done. Just in the last 3 years, we've given 70% more than we have. We went from 40 to $210 million. Senator John Arthur Smith has been a leading advocate for not, as well as the rest of us, not creating a permanent fund to do this. And so I know there's a lot of corruption out there, and there's people talking about finding nearly $1 billion in corruption, and so there's lots of other sources, potential sources for early childhood funding. If we stop social promotion, some of the arguments are, going to the same grade twice, which I've done. I know Representative Harper and others have had people in their family do that too. What's ever best for the child, in my opinion, is what needs to be done. And so in this case, I think we're doing the child a disservice if we're sending them on to the 4th grade without the ability to read. They cannot read to learn at that point, and that's what needs to happen. Also, as an educator, there's other education issues. Certainly we're going to be continuing to look at the evaluation system and how that's rolled out, whether it's being done too fast or not, or that's certainly a complex issue that we're going to keep a close eye on. Driver's license, which I'm sure you'll hear Representative Pacheco talk about here pretty soon. We'll want to continue to fight against illegal immigrants getting licenses, and I know Paul has some great ideas for that. So originally, as an educator, education has been a top concern of mine, job creation, the economy, and public safety. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. One of the things you guys talked about last year and we listened to was some of the needs in our city as far as water and roads, infrastructure. And we've helped to do that. That's 9 days from now. We'll really get into that a little bit more with our capital outlay meeting, and we hope you all return for that. There's been a lot of discussion recently. So DWI bills, I'm kind of the DWI guy and glad to do it in the public safety aspect there. There's 11 DWI bills I'm looking at right now. One of them that sparks my interest the most would be to, on the interlock system, to punish the people that have the highest blood alcohol content first. It's a little bit disproportional right now, and those are the people that are causing 60% of the accidents and the deaths, and so those are the ones that I want to focus on. I'll continue to look at human trafficking bills. There's an online prostitution bill that some would say doesn't dramatically affect Rio Rancho, but it's a statewide problem that needs to be fixed, and I'm definitely going to work to continue that process.
Representative Pacheco.
I'm going to be real short because I want to hear from you guys. I'm the only representative up here that has kind of multi-jurisdictional, so I represent District 23 real briefly, the southern tip of Rio Rancho. I have actually 2 precincts in Rio Rancho. I represent the majority of Corrales except for 1 precinct in northern Corrales and also a large portion of northwest Albuquerque. Just a couple of things that really important that we were listening to what you guys have to say. That's really what we're here for. Not to talk about so much things that we're doing or are not doing or that we're trying to do. I just want to be real brief. A couple of the issues that I've been shouldering, one of them being the driver's license bill, which has been it has been an interesting ride for me. I will continue to try to get that law repealed. From a public safety standpoint, it's just ludicrous that we are still giving illegal immigrants driver's licenses, and it's creating a real problem. Come January 1st, 2016, the Department of Homeland Security has basically said that the Real ID Act will be enforced, that if we have not cleaned up and basically are not in compliance with the Real ID Act, that we will start to have passports to get on airplanes because our driver's license, they've been so compromised that there are other states that will refuse to look at them and look at them as real identification. So I've run 4 separate bills. I ran 2 along with the driver's license bill last session. I ran 2 the first session. And I just had a real hard time, because even though 75% of the state of New Mexico wants that law repealed, we've got some of my colleagues on the other side believe that the public safety aspect is not real. It's not important. It's somehow we're being discriminatory, and that's not it at all. I have nothing against immigrants. My grandparents were immigrants, God bless them, and but they came in the right way, and they came in the front door, and they try to murky that up. And the reality is, this is not an immigration bill; it's a public safety bill. A couple of the other issues that I will be working hard on. I've decided to try and shoulder the Kendra's law. We do not have a Kendra's law in New Mexico. We're one of 5 states that does not have one. And obviously, we've all been watching the news, and it's not just an Albuquerque or New Mexico issue, but a lot of the issues that we're having with our mentally ill. And this country, and I'll be up front, that we've dropped the ball on behavioral health in this country since the late 70s, early 80s. If you remember back, I was just a youngster, and President Carter was talking about, releasing a lot of and closing a lot of the mental institutions, and on the heels of that, Reagan came into power, and he basically did just that. And so there were people that needed to be released, but we released everybody. So now we have a real problem. We have a lot of individuals who are wandering around the streets who really need mental health care. I have a little bit of experience in this. I was a crisis intervention officer for the Albuquerque Police Department for 5 years, so I dealt with mental health consumers all the time. The biggest problem that we have, and this again is a national problem, it's not just a state or a city of Albuquerque issue, we do not have enough long-term care, we do not have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, and we don't have enough bed space. So there are those individuals that need long-term care. And so what you're seeing now is you're seeing police officers and public safety having to deal with these individuals. And a lot of them are self-medicating. So maybe they're not taking their prescribed prescription drugs, but they're using street drugs. And so you have officers, and again, we're human beings. We all make mistakes. I made mistakes as a police officer, tried not to make big mistakes, but we're human beings. We're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists, but those individuals, those officers, are having to deal with these individuals. And a lot of times they don't have the skills and they don't have the knowledge on how to deal with them. And so they deal with them in the only way that they know how to, which is their training. So it's important that our officers are trained and that we have more funding for those issues. So those are, I'm not going to go, there was other parts, but I want to hear from everybody. Those are the big lifts that I'm going to try to work. And I will tell you that Kendra's law is not going to be easy. It's going to be another one just like the driver's license bill. This is not a simple issue. It's going to take a lot of work. With not only, we're going to have to balance public safety along with the individual's rights, the consumer's rights. So it's going to be we're going to have to just be really careful with it. But we need to start working towards that, and I have made a commitment that I'm going to take the lead in that also. So with that, I am honored to be here, and it is an honor for me to serve up in Santa Fe. I'm learning. I learn something new every day, and I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk to us. Thank you.
A couple things that have been on my mind for a while and have gotten some attention recently in the press, and I know many of you are aware of the problem that is the funding of our Rio Rancho public schools. If you look at the list that ranks all of the different school districts and how much funding they get per pupil, Rio Rancho is always at the bottom. It's almost a game. Who's going to be last place, Rio Rancho or Hobbs this year? And the list, we got $6,500 per student this year in state equalization guarantee funding. Albuquerque gets about $9,000 per student. Bernalillo Public Schools gets around $12,000 per student. And I'm so very proud of our school district. They're the best bang for the buck. You know, student performance is the top in the state. Our administrators and teachers are doing an amazing job, but we're not giving them the resources they need, and they've been cutting and cutting and cutting, and now they're getting to the point where they're going to cut the bone. And so the strategy is not to change the funding formula, because that would be a huge lift and take many years. We probably need to start that conversation, by the way. But this year, I'm looking at working with my colleagues here to carry a bill that we're probably going to call baseline funding. And the concept is, it doesn't matter what the funding formula spits out, you can't pay less than X dollars per student. And perhaps in that way we can get the bottom 15 districts a little more fair share of funding, a little parity with regard to the other districts. And the big trick with that will be, can we do that with new money, or are we going to have to take away money from other districts? And that'll be the big political fight, and hopefully we don't have to go there. The second one that really impacts Rio Rancho, I carried legislation last year to help with the hold harmless phase out. Many of you are familiar with the hold harmless payments that cities and counties have been getting from the state. When Bill Richardson decided to get rid of food and medical sales tax or gross receipts tax, and the cities and counties, they get about half of that gross receipts tax, and so they went up to him and said, hey, you're going to really hurt our budgets, and we're going to oppose this. And he said, well, you know, we'll make a deal. What you would have gotten, the state will pay you. And those are called hold harmless payments. And so since 2004, 4-ish, around there, cities and counties have been getting these payments. And what are the two components of our economy with the greatest rate of inflation? Food and medical. And the payments that the state was making were just going exponentially out of control. And as part of the big tax package that passed 2 years ago to lower the corporate income tax, the state decided to phase out these payments to cities and counties. And for that reason, I actually voted against the bill, even though I was a strong supporter of changing our tax structure and going to a single sales factor so we could keep Intel here. But I've been working very closely with several agencies to make this phase out, to fix the mess that this phase out is causing. So I'll again be carrying legislation that will make sure that this is that's fair, that cities get the resources they need to make up for this loss in revenue, but not too much, and that they don't take the taxpayer for a ride on this. And then, briefly, the two other ones I'll be working on out of others. You've probably heard me talk about the problem with our gross receipts tax, and that there are 370-something exemptions to our gross receipts tax. And the joke is, if you have a friend in Santa Fe or can hire a lobbyist, you don't pay gross receipts tax. And so you just imagine this big block of Swiss cheese that is our sales tax, our gross receipts tax. And it's getting to the point now where the average is 8%, and as this hold harmless payments phase out, it'll go up to 9, maybe 10%. And it's just getting to the point where it's not sustainable. And it's crippling small business, especially because they're the ones that are shouldering more than their fair share of this gross receipts tax. So we're talking about a complete reset, where you basically take this block of Swiss cheese and put it in the oven and melt it to get rid of all exemptions, all deductions. Everyone pays the same amount, and in that way lower the rate. All right, so then we'll start with Mr. Baldwin. Would you please come forward? Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some of my concerns. I have three, what I think are big ones. First one is the federal land grab that's going on in this state. Ranchers are losing access to water, and their property rights are being trampled on. And we have a way to fight back if we have the political will to use it. and that's the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. We have other states, Oklahoma has done a lot of nullification of federal regulations. And Texas has got one where they're going to prohibit enforcement of federal firearm laws. And they've got that going on in their legislature right now. So, and there's a lot of information available on how to do that. And I'll be glad to help you find some of that if you want. Next item is right to work. And it's pretty well common knowledge that Tesla went somewhere else because we're not a right to work state. And my personal opinion is losing Tesla was not a bad thing for us because they're going to be a big water consumer, I think. And water's going to be a big concern here. So we ought to have a right to work law. And then the last one on my mind is minimum wage. I heard a lot of people talking, a lot of minimum wage stuff has come up in the counties and cities and so on. But what people are overlooking is they're cutting out high school students from the job market. And see, these young students, they don't need a living wage. They need experience. And if they're getting cut out of the job market because of a minimum wage, then they're sitting around playing video games and getting into trouble. But if they can, if any kind of a minimum wage law will make allowance for the high school kids to be able to work for a lower wage just to get some experience, I think that'd go a long way towards helping our kids develop into useful citizens that we can use later on. So those are my ideas, and I thank you for letting me share them.
Thank you. Comments, Jimmy?
I would just say, Mr. Baldwin, that I know the minority leader in the Senate is planning on bringing a right-to-work bill, and I'll be joining him on that bill. I agree. I don't think that you should have to join any group to work. And so hopefully we can move some legislation that way to make this right to work state. I think almost every study from a reputable group has shown that if we had a right to work state, our economy would be closer to Arizona's and not New Mexico's. So appreciate it. Thank you.
And I would echo that. I'd have to say, coming from Arizona myself for quite a while and working, I know that right to work, private and unions can work together in the private sector. I've seen it done. It actually, in many cases, helps unions out a little bit. But there's certainly a lot of pushback right now from unions because they see it coming. One of the best things you can do is look at the two recent states that have become right to work, and that's Michigan and Indiana, and look at where they were at before, and then look at what's happened since they become right to work, and you'll see some huge differences there. And I think that's what the message we need to spread and to show, because that can be happening right here in New Mexico. Minimum wage, certainly, thanks for bringing that up, Dave. That's something we're going to take a close look at, and I think you've got different views there. Certainly, any wage increase is going to hurt businesses, but yet we hear the argument, we need to be competitive with our surrounding states. We're maybe like 50 cents away in some cases. 50 cents is pretty small compared to the $2, $3, $4 jump that some of these other people want to take. So we'll definitely be looking closely at that.
Yeah, I think I'll just add, Mr. Goldman, thanks for your comments. We had talked a little bit about your idea to make an exemption for high school students for minimum wage. I think that's a great idea. I know my very first job, I was a dishwasher at the old Rio Rancho country club. And you know, I worked hard for that $5.25 an hour. I really believe the minimum wage is designed for the purpose of allowing young people without experience to get a job and not to be taken advantage of by their employer. Now, these folks obviously don't need a living wage, and folks that are supporting a family or on their own, you know, should be working to climb the ladder, working on an education, which is why we work so hard to help, you know, save the lottery scholarship. And you know, there's lots of ways for people to go to CNN and other places and get that education. And so I really appreciate that comment, and we'll look into the federal land grab. There's a lot of New Mexico that is owned by the feds, and I've once heard it said that if you looked at the population or the proportion of the state that is owned by the feds versus that is owned by themselves, there's a direct correlation to poverty. And so I would be very interested in looking at how we can prevent grabs, but also perhaps even secure some of that land for ourselves. So thank you. With that, next we have Mr. Henry Ng.
My name is Henry Ng, and I live at 2864 West Island Loop. And I've been living here since 1983, 31 years. And before talking, I want to thank the legislature, and I think most of the people here share that, my feeling that you folks have devoted a lot of your time and effort and to serve our community, and we are grateful. Now, next I want to express my opinion about the priority of the next legislative session. And there's one overriding, in my opinion, one overriding theme should be to improve the economy, as the former President Clinton's campaign coined the phrase, "Is the economy stupid?" And you know what happened next. Anyway, in general, a community with growing and vibrant economy can fix a majority of the problem, because you can afford to fulfill a lot of the local need and afford to pay for a lot of social amenities. And two statewide priorities. Number one, I echo the gentleman, is the right to work. And especially the right to work refer to economic-based jobs. And economic-based jobs are germane to the community's survival, critical survival, and the growth. Without outside money coming into our community, the people who cannot get a job will leave, and the community will spiral in a slow decay. And the second, for the statewide priority, should be education reform. And education reform can hand in hand with this so-called tool to attract the economic-based jobs. Good paid jobs demand a well-educated workforce, or else you're going to have we do not need to have more people doing, minimum wage job. Good education system is a very, very important economic tool. It's not just for home people here, it's for attracting people coming in. And also, it's critical to raise our high school graduation rate. It's even more important to make sure they're not functional illiterate when they got a diploma in their hand. And I first hand to tell you that I have a lot of those in my career, teaching those kids. Rio Rancho Public School is very good in general. And our surrounding, not that good. And this is, we work in the community. When Rio Rancho expand, we need to take care of everybody. We are brothers and sisters living in the same community. We have to get it all working. And I want to see if the legislature can help launch a pilot project to increase the number of high school graduates, as well as making sure the graduates are ready for college or career. That is in the state statute. But quantify it. Make sure it is exactly what it means. And if we got that pilot project launched, we can assure you that the economic-based job will come. And we are getting the best quality, clean, emphasize clean job that we can have as an economic base. And hopefully, that will become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments, Henry. And you've been kind enough to give us a copy here as well. There's a lot to be done in education reform. And that could almost take a whole evening in and of itself. But you've raised some good points here, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. All right, next we have Mrs. Hope Garcia. Thank you for coming.
Senator Brandt, Representatives Harper, Pacheco, and Lewis, thank you so much for this opportunity to bring our concerns to you and for being willing to do something about the things that we care about. I'm Hope Garcia, and I've lived in Rio Rancho for 26 years. There's two issues that I hope you can work to change. The first one is parental notification when minors get abortions. And please note that I'm just asking for notification. I'm not even asking for permission, just notification. Okay, right now, minors can't even get their cavities filled in a dentist office without their parents knowing about it, but they can get an abortion. And their mom and dads will not know anything about it if they choose not to tell them. As the law stands now, young girls can make this decision about a major medical procedure which can have tremendous medical and mental health repercussions for them for the rest of their lives, all without the loving guidance and care of their parents. And I think we need to stop and think about also who's going to clean up the messes that happen from this. It's not the state of New Mexico that's going to clean them up. I have heard heartbreaking testimony from parents who did not know, had no idea why their sweet, happy girls turned dark and depressed, even suicidal, because they only found out many years later, only when their daughters chose to tell them that these girls had had abortions when they were minors. So it's the moms and the dads who are left to deal with the fallout, not the government. So I'm asking, please do everything that you can to change this law so that we can parent our children properly, being fully apprised of what our kids are doing. Okay, the second issue, well, I'm a mom, so both of these issues deal with children. They're who are on my heart very most. The second issue deals with the public schools, Rio Rancho public schools. My daughter attends Cyber Academy here in the district. And I'd like to talk about the unfair funding, the inequitable funding that is going on with Rio Rancho public schools and other districts, but let me just speak to ours. Our school district is dead last. Out of 89 school districts, we are dead last in funding. We get, now this is according to the Public Education Stat Book for the fiscal year 2012, so it may be a little different than some of the other numbers we may have heard. We get roughly $7,800 per student here in Rio Rancho. While other districts and charter schools get so much more than $7,800 a student. Let me give you a few examples. Again, according to the PED stat book, APS gets about $8,600 a student. Las Cruces and Santa Fe, they get about $9,000 a student. Bernalillo Public Schools, they get $12,300 a student. The Ask Academy, who's also in Rio Rancho, they get almost $14,000 a student. Cuba gets almost $15,000 a student. There's some huge inequity going on here. Now, I know someone will always be dead last, but we're not just talking about the relative position, we're talking about some equitable funding, and I'm so happy to hear that there's some talk about some baselines. That would go a long ways to helping. There's a really big question I think we need to ask ourselves. Why are we here in Rio Rancho dead last? I mean, here's the irony. The irony is that we outperform most every other district, both academically and with co-curricular activities. We offer special education. We have the full spectrum of student needs. We don't just pick and choose our students and just get the cream of the crop. We educate everyone, and I think we do a great job at it. But we can't keep it up. We can't keep it up. We really are at the precipice here. For too long, we have been expected here in Rio Rancho, like Rumpelstiltskin, to spin gold from straw. And our school district actually has performed quite a few miracles with the relatively little money that we do receive. Let me tell you, we can stretch a dollar farther than a line around Best Buy on Black Friday. But please, we want our fair share. We're just asking for our fair share. I implore you, please fix the funding formula so that we get our fair share and that we get a level playing field against all these other schools that are surrounding us, wanting to come in and everything. We need a level playing field. So, again, thank you so much for listening to us. So appreciate this opportunity to tell you what's on our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think Ms. Garcia made some very good points. Thank you for sharing that with us and for talking very slowly and articulately there so that we can understand. And I do look forward to helping Representative Harper and everybody up here with working on that funding formula. It's an extremely sensitive issue for some people, and so we certainly need to be careful and make sure we're listening to all stakeholders involved and to do this in a timely manner that's suitable for the issue. But it is certainly, you can't deny some of your points being last out of 89 districts and performing the way that we do. Other districts should be looking at it as a role model, and in my opinion we shouldn't be punished. As an educator myself, clearly we know about unfunded mandates, things that teachers, administrators are supposed to be doing, and they're not getting paid for that, and we are stretched pretty thin. You know, all schools try to do a good job, but it's not level. I think our funding formula needs to be taken a good hard look at, and we intend to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to briefly comment on the parental notification. So I served on two committees my first term, the Taxation and Revenue Committee and then the Consumer and Public Affairs Committee. And that committee is the smallest committee out of all of the committees in the legislature. There are 5 members, 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and it's affectionately known as the Kiss of Death Committee. That's where all good Republican bills go to die. My very first session, Representative Baldonado carried a bill, parental notification bill. He worked very hard to make it as bipartisan as possible. And the bill only applied to, it wasn't even minors, it was 15 years and younger. It was very interesting to see the folks in the audience and the folks in support of the bill and the folks opposing the bill. And I'd be happy to tell you more about it offline, but I was very disappointed to see that bill killed right away. It wouldn't even go on to the next committee, let alone go onto the floor for a vote. I agree with you. I know that unlike filling a cavity, an abortion can have some substantial other, let's just say, repercussions or intricacies, and we want to make sure that folks with, or children that have abusive parents aren't given ammunition. We talked about that at that committee. We talked about ways around that and how to help these children that are in abusive households. And I was very disappointed to see it killed. So I want you to know that we're hoping things will be a little different now in the House of Representatives. So thank you for that. So next we have Mrs. Elisa Volley.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you. I'm Elisa Bailly. Carol Dooley couldn't be here today, but she wanted me to make sure, and I read this to you. And this is about the West Side Boulevard project. Her words are, I'm excited that the county decided to pick up the ball that the city of Rio Rancho has dropped, that the county has the vision to see the potential with the improvements that could be made for West Side Boulevard. I found it very interesting 2 weeks ago at the county commissioner workshop that one of the county commissioners that lives in Rio Rancho was so against asking the state for help with funds for this project, which makes me wonder what project he has in mind. When it came down to a vote that night, the 2 commissioners that live in Rio Rancho voted no. I find that very disturbing, being that the project was in one of the commissioners' district. He knew full well what the benefits would be, and yet he voted no. I have a real problem with the short-sightedness of the comments made by the mayor of Rio Rancho and Mr. Clayton that night. None of the projects that they talked about at that meeting will bring jobs or gross receipts to the city or county. I would ask that you follow through with this request at the state legislature for the funds to help improve West Side Boulevard for the benefit of the city of Rio Rancho and the county of Sandoval. That would bring desperately needed gross receipt tax, jobs to the city, and the construction of homes that will bring property taxes to the county. I too am for the project, the West Side project, the Boulevard project, for the growth of my city. What I do not understand is what the priorities are for the majority of the City Council of Rio Rancho and the mayor on this issue. Thank you very much, and I'd like to you might not be able to answer this question, but I have wondered how much this state, being a poor state, spends on illegals through education, whatever the state's resources are, how much is spent on lawsuits, again, all pertaining to illegal aliens. And I'm, as you know, Hispanic, and I don't like to be put in the same group that all Hispanics want illegals to have a driver's license. So I'm wondering how much is the real cost to the state, like in the Artesia, Albuquerque, and throughout the state, how much are we really spending for illegals to live in our state? And I'm a firm believer that we're not getting back what we provide for them as far as services. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Pollock.
Thank you, and I appreciate you addressing both of those issues. You know, I will say that last year we put between us almost $1 million into West Side Boulevard. So we have tried to get some of that road finished. We tried to get some work done on that road. But I want to comment more on the second part that you asked about. There are school districts in our state, Gadsden for one, that actually sends buses
Yes,
to the border.
yes, yes.
These kids cross the border every single day. They don't live in the United States at all. Board the bus and get taken to Gadsden schools, and your tax and your dollars, your money, gets taken from Rio Rancho public schools and spent down there for those students. That, even under our registration policies for registering for school, shouldn't be allowed.
No.
But you're going to have to take that up with the United States Supreme Court. Because in the 80s, the United States Supreme Court ruled that school districts must accept any student and not ask whether they're in the country legally or illegally. Now, I think it's a little bit of a stretch and a little bit of a scheme, a game, and by the way, I've told Gadsden School District this, so this is nothing new, that they're playing to get more money by sending buses to the border. When I registered my kids in Rio Rancho Public Schools, I had to bring in proof that I lived in Rio Rancho. How do you do that when you live in Mexico? There is no district, no school district in the state of New Mexico whose district boundaries extend into Mexico. So how in the world do they get away with it? I don't know. It's something I've been trying to get answers to. As far as the amount of money spent, you will never get the answer to that because it's a shell game and it's all hidden. So I appreciate it. You have the same questions I do on that, and it's something very frustrating to me that we would fund Rio Rancho Public Schools. The average we spend in this state on education is $11,000 per student. We are the 17th highest funded education system per student in the United States. 17th. And yeah, we're dead last in results, but Rio Rancho gets $6,500 per student. Almost half of the average. That's a problem. So I really appreciate that comment about that, and I'm with you. And I'll keep trying to knock that door down and get the answers to why they can legally do that. Because I don't understand how Gadsden Schools gets away with it legally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Pacheco.
Ms. Abai, one other thing, in regards to the in regards to West Side Boulevard, and we're going to talk. Obviously, we're going to have another meeting next Thursday on capital outlay. We really rely heavily on the entities, whether they're the city, the county, groups that come before us requesting capital outlay. We rely heavily on those individuals and those groups to give us the necessary information so that we can properly fund those projects.
All right, so next we have Mrs. Teresa Seiss.
Good evening, and thank you for having this public forum. And also my apologies, because 3 of you have already heard most of this. I want to thank you, Representative Pacheco. We missed you last week, but I have your packet.
Outstanding.
So we're good, we're good. And I also have it digitally, if any of you want it all digitally. I know you appreciate that. I wanted to come tonight mostly to support our legislators and thank you, because we have worked very well with you, very closely with you, and I was very excited to hear your opening presentations this evening in the support for Rio Rancho Public Schools. I'm going to try to take very little time because you've all heard this, but I also want to thank the public that is here, because there are concerns about the school district and there are some praises for us. And we know that we work very hard and we continue to work very hard, and it's a continuous improvement. Overall, we have a high graduation rate and high standards for our students, and we really feel that we're working really hard, good leadership. With that said, there is concern about the funding. There is concern about the gap between the pupil distribution. We know it's a funding formula, it's inequitable, and Ms. Garcia was very articulate with that. And our big concern, as we shared with you the other night, is not so much that there's somebody at the top and somebody at the bottom, but the gap that's there between the top and the bottom, and the average, as Senator has told us. So what we have asked is, and also we want to thank you for the increase in funding that we did get the last 2 years. We'd like to share with the community and with you all that most of that went to well-deserved compensation for our teachers. And then what is called in the funding formula fixed costs, which are not so fixed. Those are utilities, insurances, and those usually are much more than what we generate through the funding formula. And what's left is what we're trying to maintain, the programs that have made us a successful district and high-achieving district. So we do ask that you watch unfunded or underfunded mandates, and that we support Representative Harper in his efforts to try to help with the funding. And we realize that in this legislative session, there's no way we can fix the funding formula, but we would ask that you help in support that we move in that direction to look, I don't know if it's put resources to it or what, but to help seriously look at the funding formula. The other issue is transportation funding. That is a separate, as you all know, but for the community, it's a separate funding formula than the operational dollars. It's a statewide issue that's concerned because it is inequitable as well. It's an old formula. It needs to reflect what's actually happening in schools now. We used to take kids to school in the morning, pick them up in the evening, and that was it. Now we have special programs for students with special needs. Our buses run different hours, different times. We really are doing what we feel helps the educational needs of our kids. However, we are underfunded in Rio Rancho for that. We already run 3, 4, and some buses 5 tiers just to meet the needs. We have had to take the last 3 years, I believe, or 4 years, Craig, I'm not sure, out of the operational dollars to help subsidize transportation funding. So that is something that we are following and asking for your support. Also, the school grading and teacher evaluation, I believe Representative Lewis addressed this. Rio Rancho does welcome and supports a rigorous evaluation system. That goes without question. What we're worried about is the process that is in place now needs refinement, needs improvement. There's been some mistakes. And so we really support, let's fix it, let's improve on it, before we make it a high stakes. When I say high stakes, that means it's going to affect student rating on the park and on converting from the standard-based assessment to the park. And right now, we're not convinced that there is enough evidence to say that it's going to be a smooth transition. For the audience, one is a paper and pencil test, the other one is a total online test. And I'm not so sure that it's not going to be more of a test on computer skills and keyboarding skills than it is on content. So we're asking that we really look at that, and this involves teachers' livelihoods, students' grades, and school grades. So we asked that. We're going to be watching real closely for recruitment and retention issues, graduation requirements, and support local control of our school boards. We feel our superintendents and school boards know what's best for the community. What is best here may not be best for Gadsden or may not be best for Roy, New Mexico. So we do support local control. So I appreciate it. Sorry you have to hear it again, but I did want you to listen to what you all had to say. And may I approach so I can give this to Representative? Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, and I believe Representative Pacheco has a question for you as well.
Thank you, Walter. I need to see answers. Mrs. Sykes, where do you stand on, last year, we were in a deadlock over the budget. If you recall, above the line spending versus below the line spending. And we in the House it was just like this. There was those of us on our side of the aisle that wanted more money under, below the line. And our colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted less. And I'm just going to give you my feelings on it, and then I want to hear from you as to whether I'm off base on this or out in the weeds, because I've done a lot of learning on this and still am confused about a lot of the issues. But as far as below the line spending, our budget was, $2.6 billion for the state for education last year. And the governor, her request was, I think, just under 117 million of that, which was about 0.2% of the budget. And that's where we got into that conflict. And we ended up having to send the budget to the Senate. All my children have gone to public schools. I graduated from public schools. My wife graduated from public schools. So I mean, I understand public schools. I support public schools. I didn't have a real problem with the amount of money that the governor was requesting for the below the line, because my biggest concern is that, look, I understand that the school districts need to have discretion, and they need to be able to work within the parameters of their districts, and each district has unique problems, and they have to address those. But I felt like that amount of money below line spending, it's really the only control that we as legislators have on public education funding. Once it leaves us, and we're basically, we're in the rearview mirror, and we don't hear from it until next year. So what are your thoughts? I didn't have a problem with that. I like the idea that there's a certain portion of the educational budget that is specifically says to the districts, you will use this money for A, B, and C. And then the other majority of the funding, what are your thoughts on that? Am I in the weeds on this?
No, and this is a real tough one, and so I'm going to give you the best that I can, okay? And I don't mean this as a cop-out, but I believe there is a balance there. And actually, in Rio Rancho Public Schools, being that we are so low in the per pupil, when it runs through the formula or above the line, we don't get a big benefit from it because we're so low in where we rank. However, we need enough to open the doors. And Senator Brandt and I have had this conversation many times, and he asked the other night at the district, can we come up with what that base amount is to open the doors? And that moves around, and it's hard to get that dollar amount. Representative Harper, you're trying to work on a base. Now, we're all going to have to work on that. Above the line, pays our compensation, pays for those fixed costs, pays for some of our discretionary programs that we feel keeps our graduation rate up, that keeps our programs that we feel are helping us get those third graders to read. All of those things are what we need so that our district's successful. Okay, we need to make those decisions with our board and our superintendent and our cabinet. That's basically what the above the line. Below the line, it's not that we object to below the line, is that in our district, we don't always qualify to apply for competitive money below the line. So we're kind of in a catch-22. So more that runs above the line will help us, even if it doesn't help us as much as it does the 79 districts, because we end up being in the last 10. It's better than not being able to maybe get us very much from the competitive dollars because we don't qualify. And I don't mean for it to sound like a cop-out, and any of you that have heard Dr. Cleveland speak and can add to that, please do. I hope I explained it correctly without sounding like I'm wishy-washy. But we do not benefit a lot from the below the line because we're at 45% free or reduced, so a lot of times you have to be higher in free or reduced. Yet almost half of our population would qualify, but we may not with the guidelines on the below the line funding.
So, Mrs. Sykes, would you say that in what Representative Harper is talking about in trying to equalize that and rise, shrink that gap, that would help as far as, and then so that would become less of an issue? The below the line would be less of it. If you were getting more money per student, not being the last, like you said, what you guys are, that would alleviate some of that problem. Because I hear all the time from teachers, and again, I'm the only one who has, I have multiple jurisdictions. So I have APS, and then I have Rio Rancho, and then I have, there's other schools, that are in those areas, Corrales and stuff like that. So I hear all the time, though, from teachers, we don't have enough desks. We don't have enough vehicles. We don't have enough computers. We don't have enough books. We don't have
enough instructional materials. That is huge.
And what blows me away, and again, I am just a dumb cop, I don't get, with all the money that we spend, $2.6 billion, where this money is going. And so much of the time, I get so frustrated because I know the teachers have a very difficult time. I know that there's all kinds of issues. We as legislators, we only have control over the budget strings. We don't have control over a lot of other things. Thank God we've got people like Representative Lewis, Senator Brandt, and people who understand the educational system better than I do, and that's why we look to these individuals for guidance. But I just want to make sure that the teachers are being compensated properly. I think we all agree that it's one of the most important things that we have, one of the most important professions. I want to make sure that our students have safe places to go. The schools are safe. They have enough desks. They have enough material and equipment. And it frustrates me, and I'll just say it frustrates me, not only as a legislator, but as a parent, because I feel helpless. Sometimes we talk about trying to get this funding, and we're talking about making sure that we have more funding for the schools within the budget. It just seems like sometimes it's like a rat hole. We pour this money and we can't, it's like, where's it going? And I know some of the school districts are very, very top heavy. There's a lot of administration. I personally think that there's a lot of issues with that. I'm not suggesting that's the issue with Rio Rancho at all. But I'm thinking of one particular school district that tends to be very top heavy in my opinion. And so it just frustrates me because the kids are the ones that are suffering. And along with that, we all talk about having an educated workforce and how important it is for the economy of the state to draw business because we don't have enough educated students to fill really high-paying jobs. So I appreciate you coming to talking, and maybe you and I can, and again, I apologize for not being able to, I had a conflict the other night, but I look forward to talking to you more about this because It is such an important issue on so many levels.
May I add one thing, Ben? Because I get a little passionate, as you know. Absolutely, positively, there should be transparency. Absolutely, positively, should be transparency. And we believe that in Rio Rancho Public Schools. And Senator Brandt and I think it was in Las Vegas for the LESC in Las Vegas, New Mexico, talked about, I said, Senator, we want transparency, and if there's issues with the use of money above the line with some districts, why can't we deal with those districts and not punish districts that are very transparent, can show you, I don't believe, as the hours we're putting in, I don't think we would be considered top-heavy, but that's my opinion. And I just feel like above-the-line funding, if we can't pay the bills and we're having to use operational dollars that should not be for instructional materials, in instructional materials, because we used to get a little over $100 per student about 4 years ago. Now we're at $65 per student. So that gap is out of above the line money from our district. And so absolutely we want transparency. We want you to understand where our money is going, and I can only speak for our district, and we welcome that. So I just had to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Senator Brandt and then Representative Lewis.
You know, I'm going to time myself to keep myself to a minute, because otherwise I'll go on forever. But when it comes to the below-the-line funding, my position has been pretty clear with the Secretary before the Senate Education Committee, that if Rio Rancho can't qualify for that money, I won't support it. And I think that's where my position has been and will stay. You know, if you want to put money below the line and you want to make it where every district in the state can qualify to get it for some specific program and open it to every district, I'm all for it, as long as it's balanced, like you said. But if you're going to put something below the line that's going to send more money outside of the lowest funded districts to fund districts like Jemez Valley, who buys an iPod for every teacher that comes into their district and waste it in several other ways, then I'm not for that at all. Thank you.
That's that competitive money, it's rather than, I could go on and on.
This one left.
Okay, I'll be quick. So, thank you again for being here, and tell me if I'm correct, we put $20 million below the line this year, and that was the big fight. Compared to, and that's right here, whereas above the line is way up here. And so it's not as simple as dividing that by 89 districts and dividing it. So how much money in your estimation do you think Rio Rancho lost? Or what portion of that 20 million below the line?
I would have to get back to you unless Craig knows. I mean, that I couldn't do that. I'd have to talk to Randy and have him run numbers. I'm sorry, Representative.
No
I
problem.
can get back to you with that.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And I can get back to you with like the amount that we did get, like from Reads to Lead, or Leads to Read. I think I said it backwards. Rio Rancho does get some of that money. So there's, you know, there are some funds that we do get. I just think it's more of a sufficiency issue above the line. And we will see you again.
And I do remember having a meeting to see how Rio Rancho could benefit from some of that money. So we'll talk later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sykes. Appreciate it. All right. Our final speaker, and certainly not least, is Mr. Todd Hansman.
Gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and we'll talk individually. I want to talk about strategy first, and then the tactics that fall in behind that. And the strategy, I'm sympathetic to Representative Pacheco's position, dealing specifically with the issues of being able to get the driver's license passed. There's issue after issue, and each one of you have your own bills that are important to you individually and to the community and even to the region, and I appreciate the fact that that you're working on those things. And the fact of the matter is that some of those issues will not change until there is more change. And because you control the House, there's an opportunity now to put bills on the floor to get votes from those members who need to be removed. And it's a position not of R versus D, but of conservative versus liberal, or solution-oriented versus whatever decision that they're making. And some of these representatives need to either hear that they're an impediment and need to be removed, or they need to get on board. And they can either be talked to as solution-oriented and moved in that direction, or they can be talked to as opponents. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily our enemy, but they are an opponent. And keeping it on that level is important because ideas have value and words have meaning, ideas have consequences. And so the strategy for me is to get these issues in front of those people to vote and then carry it through to the campaigns. There are going to be a lot of people that claim credit for the positions that you guys will be able to make some changes in the House, and I hope I've been a part of that. And I want you guys to know that it's important to me that when we have that control, that we make the changes that are necessary. And I'm going to go to tactics now. Specifically, transparency in the legislature. There is an attitude about keeping some things quiet and behind closed doors. Some of those things shouldn't be in public anyway, because people behave badly. Some of those things should be exposed specifically because people behave badly. And it's up to you to hold that moral compass up, that ethical boundary, and make it clear when it's breached. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I also think that it's important that the votes that you take and the discussions, the negotiations, be in a more transparent position. That means recording the sessions that happen in committee and putting those on television, put them on cable so that they're available to everyone all the time. And it will make for a better set of circumstances, better discussion. I'm always in favor of robust public discourse, and I appreciate the fact that you have those discourses, but many times, conference committee in particular, I'm interested in how people behave, because those are the deals where the corruption occurs. Those are the deals, those are the places where the problem in the legislature occurs. And I know that that's a personal problem for each one of you. And what I mean by that is having to deal with those interactions and make deals go forward, make things happen in a forward fashion, specific to tactics. I do think it's important. I'll agree with Ms. Garcia wholeheartedly and suggest that parental notification does not scratch the surface of what's happening in the pro-life movement. 57 million babies have been killed since Roe v. Wade was introduced. That's enough to populate the states east or west of New Mexico, minus California. And the fact of the matter is that women's health care, for as much as the left raises that issue as being important, the places where these abortions occur are no place for your daughters, your wives, and your mothers. The fact of the matter is the health care issue alone should be a great enough concern to move the needle. We know that public opinion is in favor of life. We know this during the Albuquerque option, not the greatest piece of legislation. I think I've spoken with you individually about that. We know that the legislature is the place for those discussions to happen, and we know there's national experts that are willing to testify. We also know that there are horrific stories that need to be told, and they're not good. I strongly suggest that the House put that as a centerpiece. The caucus only came up with 2 basic ideas. I also reflect the comments made about the minimum wage and the discussions on the driver's license issue and right to work. I realize the caucus is going to move those forward. Great, get that in front of the Senate. Let's get some of those guys on the record on those votes. Specifically, when we talk about the issues affecting Rio Rancho, yield control cannot go any further. It doesn't do any good to have 7 members who are conservative at the front, whether they agree or disagree with one another on how it gets done, but the allocation of resources regarding yield control puts us in a position where all we're doing is moving the dice. We're just moving the place where the money gets paid. DFA comes back, we have heard testimony in this chamber about small businessmen who've seen 52, 53, 54% increases over a 3-year period in their taxes. Why would we invite new businesses to come in and then tax them so that they can't stay? That is not an acceptable an acceptable scenario. So yield control cannot go unaddressed this session. Please take that up. I wanted to thank Representative Harper in particular for the work that you did on Hold Harmless. What a sloppy mess. And you really put some guide rails on it. I appreciate that. Thank you. The issues on gross receipts tax for Rio Rancho are clearly important. We took a $100 million gamble to move into this building. Look at the palace across the street, the $18 million to get this place up and running, and the discussions for a 30-40% increase in our debt to move over here without a commensurate increase in gross receipts tax gives us a huge problem. And the gentlemen, the people that sit in those seats on different nights, wrestle with this problem day in and day out. It creates contention, it creates discontent and discord, and the problem is actually in your chairs. And it's time for you to deal with the gross receipts tax issue. The final issue is on DWI. There's another proposal coming forward from the council to deal with DWI at the municipal level. And with all due respect, it's the state's problem with the municipalities having to bear the burden. Right now, Albuquerque spends an enormous amount of money on lawsuits for DWI seizures. And what's happening is a shift in how those budgets get handled, because law enforcement then becomes able to manage more of their own budget by the seizures. And that removes one of the principles of democracy, and that's checks and balances. So it's important that the DWI issue get dealt with at the state level. Thank you for the consolidation. Please deal with the issue of seizures. It's not enough to just say we're going to consolidate and put it in one place. Consolidation bills often have tiny loopholes, and I just would mention it's really important to have a good working relationship with those analysts. Know your analysts, know who they are, know what their background is, because without that connection, those little tiny details are the things that get missed. And finally, like the ditch bank brawl, I'll tell you that if anybody attacks you, I'm there for it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hawthorne. Comments? Gentlemen? All right, I know the hour is late. I will make one quick comment. Again, thank you for your comments. I actually last session carried legislation with Jeff Steinborn, who was a Democrat from Las Cruces. And I thought this legislation was a no-brainer. It was to stream all legislative meetings and to archive them on a website that was user-friendly. It didn't make it out of committee. And then I was surprised this last election. I was trying to help some of my colleagues in their races, and I remember that some of their opponents had made some pretty bad votes in committee. I went to the online record of those bills, and I was shocked to see that the votes weren't there. In some of the bills listed, they were there, but in some they weren't. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly on the transparency issue being a big problem in our state. And you'll recall the uphill battle was just for Janice Arnold Jones to get our legislative meetings during the session streamed. So there is, I don't understand it. I think open and transparent government engenders trust and also holds us accountable. And I think all of us here would say that if we're not holding up the muster, we don't want to hide it from you. We want you to come and hold us accountable on that. And because we want to represent you the best we can. And so I'm really shocked to see that that is still the mentality for many folks up in the Roundhouse. And we'll be working on that this legislative session. And with that said, I want to again thank all of you for coming. It really means a lot to us that you came and shared your thoughts with us. And please, we mean it when we say, you know, our cell phones are out there on our business cards. Please contact us and let us know how you feel. And we're going to do our best this next legislative session to make this city and this state something that we can be proud of, a place where our children can find good jobs and work and get a good education. And I just love the green chili here. Let's make it some other advances on other lists. So thank you again for coming tonight.